Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, and this is Televisionation. I am very happy to welcome Steve Langdon, who is the Director of Partnerships from Parrot Analytics. I think from the EMEA regions, correct, Steve?
Yeah, that's correct. I look after and lead the EMEA region, yeah.
And by the way, just letting everybody know, we're having people like Steve come on because we want to hear what's going on around the world to the TV Nation. The Televisionation. It's the whole community of people who are working in this business on every platform. And we want to make sure everyone keeps together, is more visible, is connected, so that things can keep developing. So we're very happy to welcome other people. Please contact me if you'd like to be on the show. So Steve, so much is going on since COVID began, and you guys are analyzing what's happening around the world with programming, which is such a great way to take the temperature, of how people are doing, how they're feeling, what they need. And so tell me a little bit about the sort of scope of what Parrot Analytics does. And, and eventually I also want to know how they do it. But maybe before that, how are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, look, I'm great, Tracy. Thanks for asking. Look, before I start...
Are you in LA, by the way? Sorry, are you in LA?
I'm in London. You can see from the picture behind me, I have it to remind myself what part of the world I'm in. But it isn't too difficult at the moment, given that we're all at home.
It took everything a while to shut down over there. My brother-in-law is a teacher in the Midlands, so we were very concerned, but I'm glad they did.
Yeah, look, we've been shut down now for, I think it's 4 weeks. We've actually been home now for 5 weeks. And I think, it's a good way to start. It's difficult talking about viewing the television shows when there's so much pandemonium and heartbreak going on outside the front doors of where we all live. However, one of the things that are being massively impacted are livelihood and industries, and we're just trying to kind of help people through this pattern at the moment. So it's great that you're putting these together, and I've watched a few of them, and it's been terrific kind of connecting with people. And I think everyone's getting used to, if there's a word for it, for home working, and everyone's enjoying video calls now.
Okay, good. Well, we might be doing some live events going forward too to connect people interactively. So tell me, I mean, you had a long history in this business. You can go into that very shortly, or if you like, it depends. I know English people like to be kind of low key and restrained and not talk about themselves very much. I have an English husband. I know how that works.
I won't go too long on that, but essentially what I've done in my career is I've been through the content part. So I've been working for a massive broadcaster over in Australia. I then shifted to the distribution section, where I worked for how television actually got to people, which obviously moved into streaming. I then did my master's in screen business at the Australian Film and Television School, which was an amazing part of my career, and really made me understand the whole kind of circle of the content life cycle. And then I worked for a Silicon Valley company called Uyala, which was like putting together, that's the first kind of when data came into what I was doing, when I realized that data was kind of going to be the lifeblood of the television industry, like in the nexus of it. And then I did my time for Comcast. So I've essentially kind of worked around the industry, and now I find myself in a privileged position where I'm able to use that experience at Parrot Analytics to help companies understand how they can use data other than the ratings and extrapolated panel systems to really make a difference in their companies.
Okay, so obviously you've had a lot of experience on all of these different platforms, and that's also what Parrot's about, right? Really analyzing data across many different sort of surfaces. So I know you're gathering things like from not only all over the world, but peer-to-peer, YouTube data, I think I saw, Wikipedia, on demand, and programming, regular television programming, cable, OTT. How are you doing all of that? How are you gathering data on Netflix viewing and things like that? Because, Netflix doesn't just release that information. So how are you bringing all of that data? How are you gathering that data, first of all?
Yeah, look, I mean, let's take a step back and realize why we're doing it. I mean, with the proliferation of platforms, with the proliferation of content, how you view the very way that people engage with television has changed massively since you and I were working in interactive TV back in the early 2000s, and it was there was no such thing as OTT. So now what we do is we empirically measure the engagement that consumers have with TV shows. So we do that by looking at a thesis of what we call the attention economy. Everyone can only have their attention on one thing at a time. And, Reed Hastings from Netflix says that his biggest competitor is sleep. Yeah, so he understands that it's about time spent with TV shows that really is a metric of the success of them. So what we do is we do away with panel-based measurement and empirical and panels, and we look more at the empirical way that people engage with TV shows. And you're exactly right. We do that in a few key ways. The first way is we track social media comments about television shows. So if you mention a television show hashtag on Twitter or like a show on Facebook, we capture that as what we call a demand expression. We also capture social video sites. So the biggest social video sites in the world, we understand what videos are going up there, what's being viewed, what's being commented on. Thirdly, we look at how people research television. That seems an odd one to people, but really when you're sort of in the physical world and you're out and about, when we do get out and about again and you see a billboard for a television show, the first thing you might want to do is look it up on Wikipedia, find out what channel it's on, find out when it premieres. And while you're watching the show, you want to understand much more about that show. We saw a massive research spike for Chernobyl, the HBO drama, where people were really trying to piece together the realistic aspects of that show. Were people really on that roof for 90 seconds? Did those characters really exist? So research is actually a big part of what we do. People research TV in lots of different ways. And the fourth bucket is what we call downloading and streaming, and what the industry calls piracy. So we essentially look at piracy from as soon as a show goes up on a pirate search web, we take a copy of that and we look at the seeders and leechers from around the world, not from a identification and enforcement perspective, more to help the industry understand how content is being consumed by downloading and streaming, and what that can help them with their business models for, say, distribution and sales and windowing. So yeah, we take all four of those main buckets with lots of different kind of websites within them, and we build an empirical view of how someone engages with a television show.
I kind of vaguely remember a story a long time ago that there was some kind of a heavy metal group, I want to say it was White Snake, and they found that people were illegally downloading their songs somehow in Brazil or somewhere in South America. So instead of somehow punishing them, they went down there and they just did a lot of concerts. Like they used that information, to bring their content to the people who were interested. So I mean,
if you look at a country that's got a lot of piracy and you're, say, a pay TV platform, isn't it great that you can analyze what is being pirated in content in taste clusters that are outside what you have on your platform, and maybe encourage you to take a few of those shows and bring down that piracy problem and take up your subscribers? So we tend to look at piracy in a much more positive way. If there is a way of doing that, to help companies understand what they can from it that helps their business.
So I know you have been looking at what's going on in this environment, right? Where people are locked in. Of course, it's a really interesting time to see what people are watching when there's no sports programming on, and how tastes are shifting. So I know you want to talk a little bit about genre demand, what's happening in the US and in Europe. Can you give me a taste of what you guys are seeing?
Yeah, sure. So we realize that we're right at the forefront of being able to help industry understand what's going on around the world, because we're platform agnostic, we're kind of language agnostic. We deal in like 26 different languages. We're in 249 different countries collecting data. So we understood that we could put together some relevant information that would help people understand what's going on during the pandemic. Now, the first interesting thing that we worked on was the level of demand.
I need to interrupt you first, but are you also, sorry to interrupt you, I know how English people don't like that, but are you also looking at class level or ethnicity and things like that? Is that part of this perspective? Is it really just about numbers and who's watching what?
Yeah, for this study, we really looked at exactly that, who is watching what, and how the way that we view is shifting, particularly around the lockdowns, and particularly around what sort of things are being viewed, and then more importantly, what does that help the industry understand in the next 6 to 9 months. So for this study, we're not quite so worried about exactly the demographics of who's watching. It's just what's being watched and what can we learn from that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting me interrupt you briefly, but go ahead.
No, that's right. So interestingly, in the 2 weeks before lockdown, and I'll take the UK as an example, we actually saw in our graphs the total demand for television shows coming down temporarily. Now that's interesting because every other study that you read will say viewing is shooting up left, right, and centre, and we agree it is shooting up after lockdown. But we don't look at the news cycle. Okay, we look at television shows. So what was happening was that everyone was being distracted by the constant 24/7 news cycle, and the time that they were spending understanding television shows, downloading television shows, talking about television shows was gradually being replaced by understanding and researching more about coronavirus and what was coming. So we actually saw a decline in demand for total television. And we've actually got a chart that maps it down to the moment where Boris Johnson decided to lock down the UK, which is where distraction was at its absolute maximum. But then as soon as he closed the schools and put everyone in lockdown, there was a big bounce up back of viewing. And in fact, the biggest bounce day we saw was when he announced that pubs and restaurants would be closed. So everyone was immediately thinking what they were going to watch. And then after that, we saw the big climb back up to almost normal levels. There's still a bit of distraction out there, but almost normal levels of viewing. But what we understood was that the genres that were being looked at were changing quite significantly, depending on what country you were in. And we studied them in Great Britain, in Italy, and in France, and in Germany. And the results were quite interesting.
What did you discover?
So, first of all, we discovered a really interesting trend of people watching apocalyptic dramas, disaster movies, disaster television, and action and adventure, which doesn't sound like the perfect bedfellows for a quiet night in. And the Insight team looked at it, and we came to the conclusion that this was kind of cathartic viewing. This is kind of things aren't as bad as, say, the plot of The Walking Dead or Kingdom. Okay, so it's almost we were fictionalizing what was going on. But over the last, and we're still seeing the increase at the moment, there's a big drive for that genre of show. The increase has slowed down a bit now, but just before lockdown, that was really kind of peaking.
I know the movie Contagion was very popular, but it was very similar to what's going on. It's almost like, do they want to learn something from this, or are they trying to experience what could happen? I don't know. It's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, the coping mechanism being cathartic, we're not exactly sure, but it was a really interesting trend that we saw. Now, the next thing we saw was, of course, the move to what the television industry calls comfort viewing. We saw a lot of people wanting, now they were locked down, they wanted to escape what was going outside the front door and really kind of get into some lighter viewing. Now, I've seen this happen a couple of times before. After the towers fell in 2001, there was a big drive towards lighter viewing. During the GFC, there was a drive towards lighter viewing. And in fact, there's been a drive towards slightly lighter viewing ever since the presidential inauguration a few years ago. We've seen a shift of percentage going to hard drama viewing, going to lighter viewing. So we kind of look at leading indicators. And we saw the same thing, but this one wasn't gradual. This was almost like an immediate shift to more lighter viewing. And whenever you go in the press at the moment, you'll see that the commissioners and the broadcast execs are talking about commissioning lighter fare and like really bringing in comfort viewing and escapism viewing. And you know, the Masked Singer was a big one for that one. Yeah, as soon as the Masked Singer came on the scene, people were the Masked Singer.
Okay, that's okay. Which
show?
It
was a big show in America. Then it came over to the UK, and it was a big show over here. Basically, stars dressing up in fancy dress and singing in a panel, having to guess who they were. I'm surprised you missed
that one.
I'm surprised you missed it.
I missed that entirely. Okay.
But that was kind of the industry catching up with the fact that, you know, everyone's looking for lighter fare, and with this crisis we're seeing a big shift. So in Italy we saw romantic dramas, we saw nature documentaries, we saw cooking shows, and the UK is also, alongside home learning and schooling and action animation, we're seeing rises in comfort viewing.
I've noticed that even when you bring up in conversation with people, you know, all of the serious things that are going on today, right? And if they're not experiencing it themselves, people don't want to hear it. They want, you know, lighter fare. They want some good news, like John Krasinski, or they want, you know, positive, uplifting content. People want to laugh. There's some serious things going on, though.
I saw a chart earlier on that was just looking at what news we were consuming. And obviously there was a big spike in coronavirus and COVID, and underneath that there was other news, and the difference between them got bigger and bigger and bigger. But now it's shrinking again. People are really starting to engage with other news and kind of escaping. And it's the same with television, right? It's the same. People are finally breaking away from the news cycle and getting stuck into television shows again. So
I know you're also watching subgenres and what kids are doing, and I'm kind of really fascinated as to how, you know, kids being home and watching TV or accessing video on demand or whatever, you know, how that is measuring in, because there's a lot of overlap. Are you able to sort of parse that out and see what's going on? I know I looked on one of your charts and it said educational TV or education in general was an important genre. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing, of course, is families being locked together at the moment. So, of course, we're seeing a big shift from. There's a couple of things going on. First of all, there's a lot of kids going on to social video sites, and also there's been a lot of viewing in that genre, and also parents seeking out more educational kids shows. So, of course, we're seeing that. Now, also in the daytime, what we're seeing is it shows that maybe we're more kind of targeted at prime time, and now moving into this new kind of prime time, which is early morning, lunchtime, and early afternoon. So we are seeing movement there. I think I read a statement earlier, I think it might have been from UK TV, where they were saying that there's been a 25% increase in viewers in the 4 hours during the day. So I'm sure that's being mirrored around broadcasters and operators as well, that this prime time is kind of almost shifting. And what that's doing is it's meaning that parents are having to find programming that's suitable for a whole family. So the family channels like Discovery, I've seen, are experiencing big lift at the moment. There's a lot of kind of family channels that are experiencing lift in daytime at the moment.
I've heard people request, like on Facebook or wherever, you know, do you have any great suggestions for family movies? So people are actively seeking that kind of stuff. Yeah. So how can all of this information that you're bringing in, how do you think you're going to be able to distribute this out to the right people? And also, I want you to describe all the different communities or the different sort of industries that you're studying all at once. I know you have a whole group of them, and it's such a, I know you use the term 360, and it really is. It's an interesting approach.
So yeah, I mean, we use our data, we collect all our data, but that's great. You can put it in a tool, and it's a terrific tool. At the end of the day, it's what you use that tool for and what business objective you're trying to solve that really makes the difference. So if you're trying to optimize your acquisition strategy, looking at what shows maybe you passed over last year that actually are high in demand around the world, and actually you could now bring into your schedule to fill up the autumn. Whether you're a sales house thinking we've got a bank of 150 formats that now it would make sense because they're light-hearted to look at dusting off and selling to the right territories around the world. Whether you're a marketer looking at exactly what shows should be launched and how you go about launching them at the moment. So we deal with all aspects of the television industry, and we have a big team that does all that. And to answer your question around what can you learn, I mean, look, there's people with far bigger experience and that are actually working at the coalface for this. But if I just take that out for a moment as a caveat and then look at what the data tells us, the first thing is are these genre shifts that we're seeing temporary, or are they semi-permanent? Are they literally going to hang around for 4 to 5 weeks until the lockdowns are lifted in each country one by one? Or are these big long-term trends that are literally changing the way that we produce and commission television and program television in the next 6 to 12 months? So I think that's the first one.
That's the billion-dollar question right there, right? Nobody knows how long this is going on for, and how it will impact viewing.
That's exactly right. And then you've got the streamers that are now, they've got a lot of content coming up. They release a lot of shows every month, so they're fine for a few months. But at some point, they're going to be saying, how much content do we put out at the same time? Like that. How much is too much? How much is like a saturation of, say, the drama genre, when we could actually keep that back and keep that back and keep that back and actually pad out our offering with all the shutdowns, the production shutdowns that are going on? So every single part of our business that we know and we love is not only suffering, but they're having to really think of solutions for the next 6 to 12 months. There's library content is obviously a big focus at the moment. Repackaging is a big one. Like, there's big shows. Can we identify big shows on our channel that are high in demand that maybe we can repackage with more of a play along aspect? Is one of the things that a lot of channels are looking at. Animation. There seems to be a lot of animation that's still going on because it's actually easier to do to produce and post-produce on your own, with people over a decent cloud network rather than being all together. So there may be a big spike in animation. And then importantly, what can you spot in your library that's very high in longevity, that's maybe been off air for a couple of years, that might make sense to bring back? There's a really good example of that on BBC at the moment with a show called Gavin and Stacey, which is a big show over here. And the BBC have actually brought that back to a primetime slot, because it's nostalgic, it's feel good, and they know they've got the demand for it because there was a big Christmas special this year. So I think there's going to be a lot of decisions like that.
I'm glad you brought up the some of these companies are considering, using play along potentially. I mean, I've been asking this question, but nobody has come up with specific examples yet, and I'm curious if you know of something, because it seems like the offering or looking at their library of content and all this long tail stuff and historical content and old movies, and it seems like, in this environment where they can't produce new content, there's a huge opportunity to figure out ways to explore all of these old favorites, old movies, series, like you said, Gavin and Stacey, or even like British Baking Show, right? Which just seems evergreen content. But why, or are they making them interactive? Is there a second screen app? Is there a trivia game going on? Is there a way to create community around all this content? Is anybody doing any of that? I think they could monetize that very easily and do all of the things that we've been imagining for the interactive TV marketplace for a long time. But I'm kind of curious, like, how do you view all of that? But, are you also seeing a huge interest in downloading content and free content and pirating content, and everybody just wants content? So I'm kind of curious, like, Is there going to be any innovation, or are people just looking for shows? I mean, maybe those are apples and oranges. I don't know, but it seems like
it's almost like going back to the future, right? When we were both doing interactive television, we were looking at what is on the main screen and what can we have on a red button or whatever the local broadcaster had that allows you a further insight into that show. And I worked on things where we had play-alongs with quizzes and reality shows, and where we had directors' commentaries on major comedy shows and big drama shows. So it's almost like bringing those back to the fore. I mean, I saw a report earlier that said that the Big Bang, people that, I think it was people aged between 23 and 50, 40% of them said that they would actively look at a streaming platform that had the Big Bang Theory on. Okay, so that is a massive acquisition driver for, I think HBO Max had the Big Bang Theory, and it's not been on streaming before. So what are the kind of things that you can place alongside that would also kind of refresh that? Is there a commentary? Is there extras or whatever? But I agree with you. I think ITV over here are doing very well. Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway, which is a massive studio-based show. They've done a brilliant job in the last couple of weeks of running that from the presenters' homes and coming up with very innovative ways of keeping the show going. There's also, I see a lot of commissions on MTV and a few others are looking at quizzes from homes, quarantine quizzes. There's a chef that's been doing shows on Channel 4, Jamie Oliver, around how to cook during quarantine. So the opportunities are there for sure. I think the industry is still kind of bedding into it at the moment, Tracy, and we need a few more kind of weeks. But the industry is full of innovation, and I'm sure they'll come up with things.
Well, because you're able to track downloads and other social media things, I'd be definitely very curious. So please keep in touch with me about that. I would love to hear if people are looking for interactivity and educational opportunities alongside, their content, if they're calling for that.
Sure.
I'm also curious, what do you think about the phenomenon, like you were talking about earlier, where people might be holding content back and putting things back under a paywall, putting things forward? Like they've just launched Trolls over here, as a movie that's never been in the movie theaters. It's a release. They're renting it for $19.99, right? Which normally they rent for less than that. You're usually buying the video for $19.99 perhaps, or something a little less than that. Do you think that will play well all over the world? Do you think people, are going to be willing to buy first release content, or because of what do you think about that?
Well, it certainly works in our front room over the weekend because we hired Trolls out over Easter Sunday. I thought it was a very interesting experiment, very well timed experiment, and very well placed content to run that experiment on. I know my kids enjoyed it. I definitely don't think that premium VOD, I think they're calling it, is just for quarantine. I think it will exist after that. But I think everyone will be absolutely dying to get back into the community in a month or two. So I certainly don't feel there's going to be any issue with getting people back in theatrical, getting people back in cinemas. I think if anything, it's going to drive demand even higher for out-of-home viewing. I'm excited about that. But then if you look at it from the other perspective, the streamers have a lot of exclusive content, and it's all very, very high quality content. And a lot of the streamers also belong to major media conglomerates. So what you may see is that shows that were going to premiere on a streamer, there may be negotiations taking place to move that show onto a main channel to fill a gap. I think we may see a few of those. So can you understand, is there a niche, is there a fandom, or is there mass appeal to a show that you were going to put on a streamer that would now convert to an advertising opportunity on a main channel?
I'm also seeing that a lot of these D2C services like CBS All Access, they offered a free month to watch all of Star Trek stuff, right? If you sign up now.
Right.
So it's like they're opening the doors a little bit to get those email addresses, to get those accounts, to get you, interested. It's kind of like, drug dealers giving you those free drugs, a little bit to taste the goods, where they weren't giving you that before. Perhaps maybe it was a 14-day trial. Now they're giving you a month. Are you seeing more of those kinds of things? Do you see that? Other details?
It was it's a terrible thing, but it was probably a good time to launch a major platform like Disney Plus, right? A family hitting platform that we knew would get lots of people signed up for it, even more with where we are. So yeah, a few companies, are doing okay out of it. I think one of the things that I've seen, which is really interesting, that I wanted to bring up, was the success of Tiger King. Now, Tiger King, have you seen it?
No, I'm not into like captive tiger things, but I saw a little bit of a promo for it. I'm sure it's popular, but
it's essentially a true crime series. But we've seen it it was a low burn when it first arrived, but it arrived kind of just around the time when the world was shutting down. So it could be one of the first viral hits of quarantine. And what I mean by that is that because of the OMG-ness on it, or even the WTF-ness of it, with all the characters, it had the perfect ingredients for a show to go viral. So it had talkability, it had shareability, it was grounded in reality, yet it was really bizarre. And
didn't he get COVID? Didn't he get coronavirus?
Oh, I'm not sure.
I think he did.
I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
But essentially, it started rising through shareability. And what I think is going on, and I think a few companies have mentioned this, is that binging is increasing in velocity at the moment. So if you were only watching one episode of a show, you are now watching 3 a night. If you're watching 3 a night, maybe you're watching 6 a night. I've called it speed binging, is what's going on at the moment. So it's possible that the viralness of that show has only increased due to the fact that people are consuming it quicker and telling their friends about it quicker, because we're seeing quite a peak on it at the moment. So I don't know, is there a learning from that? If you've got something that is maybe scheduled for later in the year that you can bring forward that has a lot of that kind of talkability, shareability, WTF-ness, that might be something that is useful to drive viewership in this kind of lockdown scenario. The Tiger King is doing very well.
Yes, it comes up in my Netflix feed immediately.
Yeah.
But I have so many things that I want to watch, and I'm on all the platforms at all times. So anyway, I think that we talked a lot about all these things that what we wanted to cover, and I really appreciate your time. I don't have any other questions, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come out with next. In terms of do you have a project coming out soon?
Yeah, thanks. We're working hard with our clients and partners to help them through what's going on. We're going to be releasing a large piece shortly that kind of goes through step by step what we're seeing, and more importantly, how companies can take our learnings and convert them into strategies for traversing through what's going on at the moment. So keep an eye out for that. But we're here to help connect content creators with monetization by understanding how people engage with content. There is no better time for us to be doing that than right now. So we're really trying to be part of the solution. But thanks very much. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. They're definitely really interesting. If you feel like giving me lots of data secretly, I'd be happy to take it.
No problem. We have a bit of data floating around.
All right, sounds good. Steve, thank you so much for joining me. You can find Steve's company, Parrot Analytics, at parrotanalytics.com. And there's lots of downloadable PDFs and videos to watch over there, and charts and things if you care to see what's happening around the world. All the countries are sort of analyzed, pretty much, seems like it. It's fascinating to realize that it really is a television nation, but it's really a worldwide community of people interested in participating in this medium, right? Most powerful medium.
It's amazing, and the differences in consumption around the world is just staggering, and I'm very privileged to be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much. I am Tracy Swedlow from Televisionation, and you can find us at tvotshow.com. And subscribe to get more emails that come out that tell you who's going to be on, and we're going to be promoting all kinds of stuff going forward. Kinds of interesting news coming out. Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. Cheers, Tracy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.